Hi, I'm John Twist of University Motors, and in this video I want to show you how to rebuild the LH Overdrive fitted to the MGB 1968 through 1980. Okay, let's take a look at the tools and the supplies and the parts that we're going to need. Here are my tools. I have the factory tool for the sprag clutch. You won't have this at home, so we've got a hose clamp that'll take its place. We've got a flat chisel here, a sharp chisel here, a punch, our ever trusty hammer. Always got to have a hammer. We've got a paint pencil that you can go to Home or Kinko's or Office Depot or someplace and purchase. This is an unusual tool here. This is called a pin spanner. This is what we need to get the oil pump out, a pin spanner. This says Blue Point, which is snap-on, and it's got a part number of AFS 482. Gosh, you probably can't get this anymore, but this is a pin spanner. Then we have some 7/16 sockets, wrenches, a 5/16 socket, some dental tools, although of course they're not really dental tools, they're layout scribes, a tool for removing 1/4-inch studs. This is a 3/4 26 die. You can use an old Speedo cable end in place of this, a 3/4-inch wrench, pair of pliers, pair of channel locks, a 1/2-inch deep socket, an extension, something to measure with. I enjoy this. And we're going to use an air tool here. I know that's cheating because I want to show you how to do this at home. Well, we will show you how to do it at home, but you'll have to construct something like this. So that's the extent of the tools. Now the parts that we need, we always need the same stuff. They're also laid out here on the table. We got our big gasket, the filter, the Speedo drive and gear, 4 3/8 nuts. I'll show you what those are for during assembly. The rear seal, the various O-rings that are necessary, and the gasket and plug here. Then for our supplies, we have some carburetor cleaner, we have grease, silicone, and oil. Plus we have a can, and into the can we will put various bits and pieces to wash them out. So I want to get going. I want to show you how to do this. We're going to do it quickly and efficiently. So let's go over to the gearbox. If you're doing this at home without compressed air, without air tools, it's necessary to knock off this rear nut first. I've got this tool that we use for differentials. It's already got studs in it. It's 2 1/8 inches across here. Okay, so if this was thinner, we could take these bolts, bolt this up to here, and use our 1 1/8 socket here and unscrew this nut. You want to do it by hand while it's attached to the gearbox, because once it's up on the bench, it's a real struggle to hold everything still. So if you don't have compressed air, then you want to make this tool 2 1/8 inches across so you can bolt it up to here to hold the rear flange from turning while you're unscrewing the nut. But I do have air. So we're going to start here and take off the remote control housing. These are 5/16 coarse bolts, and there's 6 of them. There are 3 different lengths. So it'll take us just a moment to get this done. We'll take these, throw them in our can to get them clean, and then pry off the remote control. So now we can lever the remote control away from the gearbox. If we're careful, we won't damage the gasket. And the remote control is removed and set aside. Now let's remove the overdrive unit from the gearbox. That takes a 7/16 wrench and patience. There are 8 nuts around the bottom of the unit, and some of them will come off with a socket. Most of them will come off with a wrench. I may end up using a combination of both of them here. If you have air tools, it makes it pretty easy to remove some of these, but you have to be cautious. It's a lot better to work by hand than with air and possibly damage something. Now it's necessary to pry the overdrive unit up off the back of the gearbox. Well, that'll be easier if we get one last nut done. You can see the overdrive unit has begun to pop away from the intermediate housing. We can get the last couple of nuts loose here. Do not want to damage the mating surfaces here. We do want to get this rear nut off. Now with the nuts off, we're ready to withdraw the unit and put it on the bench. Let's take another look at the overdrive unit here, the intermediate case, and we want to take the cam, lift the cam away, and we want to remove the locating ball. We want to put these in a special place where they're not going to get lost. We don't leave them on the gearbox in case something gets jostled and the ball is lost. Now we'll work on the overdrive. Here we are on the bench. We get the 8 nuts and lock washers that held the unit together. Let's go ahead and use our impact gun now. And while the unit is still all together, go ahead and pop the rear flange loose. This is a nylock nut. The way that we prepare it for reinstallation is to put it on the vise, take our chisel, distort the nylon in several spots so that the nylon is squished and it will work again as a lock nut. We'll go ahead and remove the 8 studs. These stud removers are excellent tools. They make removal of studs so easy. The aircraft guys can't use them because they slightly mar the threads. There are, after all, about 4 or 5 different ways that one can remove a stud. One is with the double nut method. Another is with a single locking cam. Then there's this, which has got a triple or quadruple locking cam. And finally, there's the best system, which is a device that threads over the existing threads and then tightens down on a taper, and threads are not marred whatsoever. For those of you who are watching carefully, there were only 7 studs here, so I've got to go back over to the overdrive unit and remove the last one. And now we have yet another tool to add to the mix. That is our vice grip. Almost everything on the car can be fixed with a hammer and a vice grip. Well, not really, but that's the joke. So here's our nut and our stud into the soup. We've got those guys done. Now let's go ahead and remove the bars. Now if we take a look at this, we'll see here the operational pistons here. These are the pistons that come up and press up and jam the clutch against the brake ring. There is a distance here. There is a distance here. And the higher this distance is, the more worn the clutch face is. For those of you who are terrified of mixing parts, not knowing for sure where the parts might go, you can certainly keep them distinct. Wash them separately. I'm very used to this, so I'm throwing them all in the same can. Now we can withdraw the pistons, the operational pistons. And begin to separate the two parts. Between the main case of the overdrive and the tail housing of the overdrive lies the brake ring. These 1/4-inch nuts, which take a 7/16 socket or wrench. These are the same in this location, and the ones that connect the overdrive to the gearbox, so getting these mixed up is of no consequence. These are also 8 of these. Here we have a stud which has come loose, making removal difficult. Again, we use our vice grips. Rear flange, had forgotten that I'd removed. And the washer. Notice that these have a side to them. They're not just bolts. You can make a case that these should be slackened off in some sort of pattern because it is under spring tension. Collect our lock washers here. There are those who say that lock washers aren't even necessary, and there's some that say you should not use reuse a lock washer. This almost looks easy. Here are 4 springs. Now we'll go ahead and remove the studs out of the main case. There's always some problem. This is why we have our punch and our hammer. Now we have the main case distinctly apart, and we can go ahead and begin taking out the smaller pieces. The solenoid lies under this plate. Solenoids rarely go bad. In all the time that I've been working on overdrives, I've only found one bad solenoid, and I put it up on the lathe and spun it and took the wire off it, found the break in the wire, repaired it, and rewound it on the lathe. There are other problems associated with the solenoid that are here's our plate with our gasket. Here's the solenoid itself. The solenoid ball, critical piece. We'll come back to that in a minute. So here is the complete solenoid, the top housing, the outside, the ball, the piston, the electrical solenoid, and the bottom plate. This all makes up the solenoid assembly. This ball bearing here is 3/16 of an inch. You should always check it. First of all, you have to get a hold of it. You should always check it to make sure that yes, in fact, it is 3/16, which is 0.1875. If I can even get it here. So that you know that this is the right size. There are two ball bearings in this unit. One is 3/16 and the other one is 5/32. They look so much the same, but if you mix them up, they don't work. So we're going to put him over here. We know that that goes to our solenoid assembly. We're not going to wash this in mineral spirits. We'll put him over here too. And we can take out our oil pump or our oil pressure relief valve. It's a 3/4 inch wrench. We have a bolt with an O-ring on the underside. Then up inside here we have, which will come out if you pull it. This is the valve assembly, the oil pressure relief assembly. This screen replaced an earlier screen which just had some slots. This whole guy together here makes up the oil pressure relief valve. If this becomes plugged, the internal pressure here in the overdrive can zoom up to 600 pounds or something and blow it apart, literally. It's made up of a filter screen, which we're going to put off on the side because he's so precious. Don't want to mess him up. A seat, a piston. Very often with the piston are some shims. There are no shims on this one. We get a spring, a low pressure relief valve, the piston, and the sleeve. Now we can get down to the oil pump. If I can find my tools, there we go. This is the filter screen. It's almost essential to have compressed air to be able to to clean up the filter screen. All these screws here are 1032 thread. They're really 2BA, but 1032 is a nearly exact replacement. Works. These have internal star washers underneath the heads. Here are the magnetic pads at the bottom. They collect very, very tiny bits of metal, which will screw up the overdrive. Here's the filter screen, which if you're careful you can reuse. It is just a gasket and a screen. Here we have the oil pickup tube. And now we have our oil pump. And the oil pump here is held in place with this guy, and that is why we have the pin spanner. Here's our other ball. So we'll measure him. Here's the use for our blunt chisel. Put him on here, and here's our oil pump spring, oil pump housing. This is galled up just a little bit. We'll polish him. And this is as far as we take this unit. This is as clean, or as clean down as we take it. There's no point in taking the heavy springs, no point in taking those out. There's no point in taking this thrust washer out of the way. On the later models, this thrust washer free floats and is often found broken. We do have a replacement for those. So here's our housing, which we'll go ahead and clean later on. This is the Planet gear assembly. He doesn't come any farther apart than he is right now, so he's set to be cleaned. This is the brake. He's set to be cleaned. We've got 4 spacers, 1, 2, 3, 4, that sit on top of this plate. You can see all this stuff there's the gray swarf on nearly everything. Here's the sun gear, which usually doesn't come out very easily, but we can make him pop out by simply taking a clip out, letting him drop through. His rotational alignment is of no consequence. And now this is as far apart as it is We'll go ahead and clean him up, although just on a quick glance, I don't see that any of the fabric is faulty. It all looks all nice. Of course, it's filthy dirty, but it all looks okay. Now we're down to our rear housing. We'll take the speedometer drive out. This has an external star washer. I want to tell you this is about the only external star washer in the entire vehicle. And this guy here, if he doesn't come out, you don't want to grab him with pliers and screw up the thread. I have a handy die here to chase those threads and clean them up. I know you don't have this because this is a 3/4 26 thread, but you do have an old Speedo cable around. You can do the same thing and be able to pull that housing out without grabbing the threads. And here we have the reason that we've taken this whole thing apart anyway. This gear is just chewed. You can see it. He's just absolutely horrid in comparison with the new one. But we could have changed this easily by just changing this. The problem is the gear on the inside is also shot. We're going to pop our clutch apart here. With some difficulty. Out comes our ring. Out comes this brass retainer. Out comes the sprag clutch. Oh my gosh, how are we going to get this all back together? But we will. There's a thrust washer that went here in the bottom. He's fallen out. We're taking all the pieces of the clutch, throwing these all in the can, taking a peek at this. There are two spacers here. This spacer has a line in it that goes to the rear of the Speedo gear. This is why we've taken the engine out of the car. This is why we've taken the overdrive off the back of the gearboxes, because that gear is chowed. This gear has been chowed for 25 years. This is the first opportunity we've had to take this customer's engine out of the car to change his clutch, and at that point, now of course we're changing the gear. This annulus should not have dropped out of this housing so freely. It should not have. Almost always it's necessary to put this thing in a press and press the annulus out of the housing. I'm very surprised that it came out like this. It'll save us a little bit of time. You can see this old rear seal is pretty tough shape. It's cracking as we force it. There is an easier way of doing this, but I'm already into doing it like this. Out he comes. We could have simply taken this bearing and driven this bearing out, and in so doing, it would have driven the oil seal out. I'm going to grab an extension here. This is the poor man's drift. Now our housing is clear. We have a free bearing. We will not take this bearing off the annulus. Now we're going to go ahead and clean everything up. Cleanliness is next to godliness, and boy, the overdrive is certainly one of those areas that really needs to be so very well cleaned. So whether you use a mineral spirit bath as this, or I mean, there's lots and lots of ways to do it. You can always wait until your wife is out shopping and put all this stuff in the dishwasher. Not the little parts, of course, but the big ones. And the dishwasher does an absolutely amazing job. Clean it all off, make it look nice. But of course your wife will either catch you or discover the stains of oil in the dishwasher. At least mine did. So you got to be real cautious. We'll do a more thorough cleansing here in a minute with carburetor cleaner, but this just gets all the oil off. And the more we handle the parts, the more you handle the parts, the better it is, because you can find errors. Find the loose gears or the cracked housing or something stuck someplace. So the more you handle the parts, the better it is. Absolutely. Some parts not only need cleaning, but they also need to be on the wire wheel or need to be surfaced. So we'll do that in just a moment. The trick when you're sifting this is not to lose any small parts down inside your cleaner. Let's go over and get these, the brake ring and the rear flange. Let's get these cleaned up on the wire wheel. The contact surface here, the mating surface on the brake ring is now very clean, and the surface that rides on the rear seal for the rear flange is also very clean. Let's go wash these off and take everything back up front. What follows here is more cleaning, surfacing, and laying all the parts out very neatly, which is going to happen a lot more quickly on film than it does in actuality. The cleaning process is so very, very important. As we take the time to clean all these pieces and lift them out individually and blow them all off, it's really paramount. I can't be any more emphatic about the essential part of getting everything as scrupulously as clean as possible, and especially cleaning up all the mating surfaces and all the areas that are going to be having gaskets or not. These are all essential. So after everything is cleaned up and all the surfaces are clean and everything is nice and smooth and every single hole we've put air down inside, down inside of every single hole, now we have to lay all the parts out in order so that they make sense. We're gonna lay out like parts with like parts. So this is a relatively quick and easy task to do. But we'll just sort through them here and we'll find all the studs that are the same length and put the same length studs with the same length studs, and the shorter studs with the shorter studs, and tiny studs with tiny studs, and things we're not sure quite what they are. It'll become obvious later on. I mean, I'm kidding, I know what all this stuff is, but we have all kinds of little bits and pieces and rollers and all these sorts of things. The point of handling these is to look for errors. The point of cleaning them is so that when we're all done here, obviously we've got a very, very clean product. Lay out all of our fasteners in order so that we might have those all available to us so that we know what's going on. We can reach for them and get them. We've cleaned them all up beforehand. We don't want to have to come back and stop assembling and then start cleaning again. That's no good. Put like parts with like parts, 1/4-inch nuts with 1/4-inch nuts, lock washers with lock washers, copper washers apparently by themselves. There's only one. And we will prevail here. We will be able to have everything all sorted out and in place, and we'll be able to find everything that we want. But it's essential to clean everything. Now, how much farther can you go? Oh my gosh. If you're so excited, you can polish everything. You can use a thread chaser, and you can chase the threads on all kinds of parts here. There's no end to the fun that you might have. Okay? Doing all these things. So we are down to most of our nuts and bolts and spacers. In fact, here on our project today, we're going to use new lock washers so that the job is nice. So we're not going to use our old lock washers. But there's a little more prep that we want to do. The brake ring in here, the surface on the brake ring, we want to polish that up just a bit. Make sure it's nice and smooth. The brake ring. And now we're ready to do some sub-unit assembly. I'm going to go get some lock washers, and the time will seem to have passed in just a flash. Now that we've done our disassembly, our cleaning, and our inspection, now we can start reassembling the unit. We'll start at the back end. Here's the rear flange. Remember those bolts I showed you? Remember those big 3/8 nuts? Okay, here's the 3/8 nut. Put that on here with a... Okay, what in the world are you doing here? But I'll show you in just a moment, and this will make all the sense in the world. So we're just starting to get this assembled here. We use our 3/8 nut only for a spacer, so that we're able to stand the unit up on its back end. Again, you could have taken the time to wire wheel all these parts, get the threads all just absolutely brilliant. There's no end to the care and the concern that you can take, and the more time you spend, and this is the fact, the more time you spend, the better product you'll get. All right, so here's our rear flange. Here's our rear housing. Into the rear housing goes the annulus. The annulus, you remember, had one spacer ring. Let's find them here. Here's a spacer ring. Here's a spacer ring. We put the solid spacer ring on first because that's where it went. We put our speedo, our new speedo drive, on next. Our ring with the spacer in there, and we can go ahead and install our rear bearing. Here it's always helpful to have some oil. It'll help the bearing seat. Bearing will almost slip in by hand if you get him straight enough, which is almost impossible. You can use a socket to catch the outer race. Hear the change. You could hear it. You could hear the change in noise. You knew it was driven home. I'm going to clear them out. If there's any swarf in there, so we'll go ahead and put a little oil on the bearing. This should not press in so easily. I am absolutely stunned. Almost always you need to use a press. Right? We're going to take our rear seal. A little grease in the back of the housing will help the seal fit. Push the seal in by hand as far as you can, which sometimes is a pretty long way, and then very gently Okay, so we know we're hitting the rear here. Now we're going to put a lot of grease on the inside of the bearing of the seal, so that when the gearbox starts to operate, that we don't have a lack of lubrication back here to burn up the oil seal. We can take our rear flange in no particular rotational alignment. We're going to put a little bit of silicone on the inside of here to protect it so it doesn't leak any oil out the splines, which I've never seen it do anyway, but it's a technique I picked up from T-type MGs. Here's our nut that we staked, and we're going to use our air gun now. We're going to cheat. If you were at home and you didn't have compressed air, you'd have to use that bar. Here's our guy. Now, see how nicely he stands up? Now we can work on him like making dinner or something. All right, here we have our bronze washer. He goes into place. And the next thing we have to install is our sprag clutch. Now the sprag clutch is a combination of several pieces here, most of which are these little rollers. There's a spring in the inside here. If you get the spring going around the wrong way, you can't assemble it. The spring allows the inside, see how it spins, right? And it wants to turn anti-clockwise. So if you put the spring in the other way around, it'll want to turn clockwise. And immediately you'll know that there's a problem because it doesn't fit. Now if I have the original factory tool, I can insert a roller and turn it, and insert a roller and turn it, and continue inserting rollers. This is cool, but guess what? You don't have the factory tool. I know you don't. I didn't have one until about a year ago. Instead, I use grease and a hose clamp. The workshop manual says, warning, do not use grease. I have not found that is a problem. I've used grease for years and years and years, and it hasn't been It has not been a problem for me at all. I just have to find the right size socket so we can drive our hose clamp. But to do this, we have to introduce a liberal amount of grease into our clutch. I may not even have enough grease left in my tube of grease to do what I want to do. So again, I know the workshop manual says do not use grease to assemble this, but I can tell you from having done it this way for all these years, I have never encountered a snag with the clutch not working correctly. The one-way clutch. Pretty nasty little mess here I've made, but let's go ahead and grease is mechanics glue. So we can go ahead and install all these rollers on the sprag clutch and have them all stay in place. Look at this. Maybe they said not to use grease because they wanted to sell their special Churchill tool. Probably not. There's probably a very reasonable, logical engineering consideration to not using grease. But as I said, I've used it all these years and it's worked just fine. So here we go. Here's the sprag clutch. Put him down on the ground. As I tighten up the rollers, you'll see the inside move? I don't get it too tight. That's pretty tight. All right, here we go. Take our clutch. Well, easy for me to say. Maybe I got to get just a little bit looser. Look at that. Now it fits in just fine. On top of this is the brass ring. On top of that, the snap ring. It all fits in. See, the clutch turns in one direction, anti-clockwise as seen from the front, but it cannot turn in the opposite direction. Now we have to install our sun and planet gears. But before we do that, we have to mark with a paint pencil the dot on the gear. So let's find the dot on the gear. There we go, there's a dot on a gear. Very, very hard to see. Oh, here's our dot right here. Can we see that dot in the camera? Probably not. But here's the dot. It's very, very tiny. And it's just a real bugger to try to get those dots lined up correctly, so we're going to highlight this. Here we're going to turn our gear. Sometimes the dot is not obvious. I think it's there. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes there's some damage on the teeth. I think it's right here. That is the alignment that these must be installed. Let's take our rear end here and set this guy up here. These have to go in at 120 degrees. And as you can see, two of them are out and that one is off. This can be a bugger. There we go. Then we get a straight line from the center through each of the dots. This guy's set to go. We can continue building. On top of here goes our brake ring. Now let's put the planet gear in here first. The sun gear rather. He is installed in no particular alignment. There's a snap ring. And again, I want to talk about the later model overdrives that have a free-floating bronze thrust washer, which is often found in the bottom of the whole unit. The sun gear jams up against it. I just drove a car the other day that I could hear that was broken because there was too much end float on the sun gear. So come on, Mr. Sun Gear. There we go. Mr. Sun Gear is in place. Now we'll take our plate, put our plate down here. Come on. It's not unusual for these guys to be bent outwards just a little bit from years of use. It's a lot of pressure on these things. Oh, and I'm hard pressed to give a good explanation of how to bring these things back into alignment. Seems sort of crude, but it does work. And then we have our 4 spacers. And above our 4 spacers we have 4 springs. It's always wise to have your workshop manual next to you while you're doing all this. And here we go. This part of the overdrive is built. The whole rear end, we can set him off. He's not going to fall over. He'll stand up. We'll put him over here, and then we'll clean up a little bit, and we'll get on to the next part. Well, we're back from our cleanup break, and although I said that the tail end was all done, it wasn't. I forgot to put in the Speedo drive. So here's my Speedo drive here with a flattened out O-ring on it. That was the old O-ring. So we're going to get a new O-ring and put that on. Here he is. Look at that. Fits right on. Right on. We're going to get our new Speedo drive here. Put some grease on him. Okay, now there is a seal down inside here, but you know I've never had much success trying to change those, so I haven't. And now we'll go ahead and install the Speedo drive in the side of the unit here. I'll try to show you doing it but without tipping the whole thing over. So there it is, and remember that I said this is the only place that uses an external star washer. Well, I went up and got a new external star washer, and it is so unfortunate that one has to remove the entire gearbox to get back here and change. I mean, the only thing that we took this whole thing apart for was to change the gear at the rear end of the overdrive. Now I can tell you that you cannot do this in place. But as soon as I say that, I know somebody will write me and say, "Oh, I changed my Speedo drive in place." And then on further qualification, they'll say they cut the tunnel out or something. Anyway, now my Speedo drive is complete, and I am done with this part. So now let's start reassembling this guy, right? So, the fun thing, let's go ahead and put the pistons in first. These scribes are the most wonderful tools. Now they're pointy, and you can poke yourself with them if you're not careful, and you can certainly ruin a new O-ring if you're not careful with it. But the action's all in the wrist, and so go ahead and get this guy, and I have my 2 new O-rings over here. You must be so careful not to confuse your new parts and your old parts. So I always suggest to people that you have a bin or a box or something, and put all the old parts into this bin or box so you don't accidentally refit some nasty old O-ring that you had just pulled off a piston shortly before. So my dump spot is over on the other end of the bench. Okay, so we got these 2 pistons here. Now these guys, we want to make sure they go in nice and square, because we don't want to shear off any of the O-ring. There we go, there's one. And come on, baby, here we go. Ooh, that does not feel good. I don't want to force him. You remember that one of these came out of here with some difficulty. There we go. He just went back in just fine. Okay, well, let's put in our oil pressure relief valve. That is located here on the bench. All right, so here's our low pressure relief. Here's the spring. Here is our valve. Oops, we have an O-ring here at the bottom. So let's get him off and make that look pretty easy. And here's our new O-ring to fit on. And we want to make sure that the valve fits in its seat and doesn't gall. It's just fine. And this whole assembly fits up inside here. And with our filter screen from before, he makes an assembly, and it all goes up inside here. Then here's our bolt that holds it all in place, and there's a little bit of an O-ring right here at the bottom. And again, we'll try to hold him in place with some grease. Three-quarter-inch wrench. Everything should be snug, but not so snug that you can't get it back apart again. All right, well, let's go ahead and assemble up. Oh, what's next? Let's just do our oil pump. Oh, speaking of our oil pump, what a terrible bit of misinformation I provided earlier on. The O-ring, the ball bearing that goes into the oil pump down here on the table, that ball bearing there is not smaller. That ball bearing is larger than the one in the solenoid. The solenoid is 3/16. That one is 7/32. So I misspoke myself. I apologize. There we go. Here we got this guy set. Put a little bit of oil, of grease on the pump here. And our spring in here provides a one-way, this is a one-way valve, but there's an O-ring on the outside of the bottom of the pump, right here at the bottom. Get him, take him off. That O-ring is the same size as the one that goes on the speedo housing. There we go. And again, we can use a little bit of grease here, because grease is like mechanics glue. It holds everything in place. Now, the pump has a rounded side. It has a flat side. The flat side goes towards the front of the overdrive unit. So we're going to get this guy installed here as best we can. Some people make a claim that it is easier to install this after you have started to put the box on the main part of the gearbox. I personally don't believe that's true. I think it's easier to install it here. You just have to get these threads to catch. And of course, that's because I've given you the wrong instruction, and the flat side doesn't go towards the front. The flat side goes towards the back. I'm just looking at it backwards. I know I can get this. Sometimes that makes this just a little bit easier to put some pressure. On this. I just have to get him started. Which he is now started, and I can take the snap ring pliers and go ahead and wind him in until he gets almost all the way home. But a terrible mistake to tell you to put that in backwards. But here we are in the field doing the best we can. And you have seen that it only goes in with a flat towards the back, and that's what aligns it. Right now I can go ahead and use my pin spanner, but I don't want to get this too tight. I don't want to have too much of a problem here. So I'm going to get this as snug as I can. And the next thing we're going to install is the solenoid. There's an O-ring on the solenoid, and this is very, very small, and it is not unusual when one orders up an O-ring to end up with a wrong size O-ring, but those are the same size, so we're home free. We'll be able to get him on all right, and in so doing, we'll be able to get him fitted. So here he is. Put a little bit of grease on the top of our solenoid. Here we have two more O-rings in what I refer to as the top hat assembly, as though this were a tiny hat on top of my head. And all these O-rings have been squished just a little bit. I can feel that they're starting to be a little squared off. An O-ring which has remained in place for a long time no longer is flexible enough to retain its cylindrical cross-section, but becomes more square. Now we're going to get our 3/16. Remember, this is the 3/16 ball bearing here, and the 7/32 is the one that goes into the. There we go. He looks like he's all right. And here is our solenoid. If you want to check the solenoid, all you need to do is energize the wire on the solenoid, and you can feel it move. Right. So into the hole goes our solenoid, and we can use a new grommet if we wanted, but this one's really going to be okay, and there isn't supposed to be very much oil that gets down in here anyway. So here we've got to install our overdrive gasket, and we're going to use a little bit of silicone sealant on this. The silicone sealant rubbed between the thumb and forefinger will make this all fit very, very nicely. Now we take our plate, which is blue. These are referred to as the blue plate or the blue overdrives, and we're going to take the shorter of our 1032 or really 2BA screws and go ahead and get these guys, get a couple of them started. We're using new 1032, rather number 10, new number 10 internal star washers. And as soon as we get these in place, we'll go ahead and tighten it up, and then after that is our filter on the bottom, and then we have to install some studs, and we'll be able to assemble the entire overdrive. The blue plate on the bottom indicates that it has the 1,000 turns per mile set of speedo gears in the back end. Now we don't snug any of these things down until they're all, and we don't tighten any of them until they're all sort of drawn down and are snug in place. Always tighten on a cross, or in case of a head gasket, an outward spiral. All right, so we're getting closer here. Here's our pickup tube for the oil. Get him in. The reason we took him out was so that we could surface the bottom of the housing. Bottom of the housing's now. So now really this old gasket, I could have reused the old gasket. I really could have, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use a liberal amount of grease here. Push the gasket on here with a socket. And then we have our plate with the cleaned magnets. And these also receive the 1032 screws. Get all the 6 of these started, and then we'll run these up snug. The one thing that I didn't do here is clean all the studs, and the studs that are going into the housing are the cleaner everything is, the better it's all going to work. So I may take a moment's break here and clean up some of the studs, but right now we're getting these guys in place. Again, you can chase all these holes with a 1032 tap if you care to, or if you're really, really good and you've got a 2BA tap, if you're really into it, that is the more correct size. In just a moment, we'll have these all done. The reason we use grease is if we want to take that gasket back off again, it'll come off. If we use silicone, then when we take that off again, we'll have to buy a new filter. Now it's time to install the studs, but I'm going to clean these up first. We've just got these cleaned up. You know, if I'd taken the time before, then they would have looked like this, but the shanks are all nice and clean. We have 2 shorter ones and 6 longer ones. The longer ones fit into here. We'll go ahead and put these in. Round and round we go. And as soon as we've got them all started, we'll use our stud tool and drive them all in snugly, more snugly than they were when we took them apart. Again, this has not been apart since it was a factory car. I mean, since it was factory new, because we've serviced this vehicle since it was new. Now, just as we have installed them here and cleaning off just a little bit of the grease, don't have to clean it all off, but some is nice. There are 2 more studs here, and those go into our tail housing. Tiniest amount of grease means that they fit together very nicely, and they'll come out again next time, whenever that next time would be. Hopefully a long time from now. Other things that can be wrong with the overdrive include a disintegration of the clutch lining. Those are available new. Sometimes one of the bearings in the planet gear assembly comes loose. There's no substitute for that other than a replacement with a good used unit. And now we're ready to install our brake ring. Here's our brake ring. Now there's no gasket on the brake ring, and that's why we've worked carefully to ensure that the mating surfaces are clean. And that's why we've wire wheeled the brake ring. So we're going to install just a thin bead of silicone around the edge of the brake ring. Both sides, tricky to do if your hands are smaller. And we don't want to get too much around the oil return cutaway shown here at 6 o'clock in your picture. That now fits like this, and this is the bottom of the unit. We want to place this on top, and this requires a little bit of fiddling and judicious positioning of the pieces because things don't always line up just perfectly. Remember the trouble we were having in the beginning when we were trying to get this thing all aligned. There we go. So now we can take these 1/4 inch nuts that take the 7/16 lock washer and go around the bottom of the unit and install them. If at first you cannot get a lock washer and nut on, then don't fit the lock washer and temporarily fit the nut. And once you've got it tight enough, then you can back the nut off. And fit the lock washer to it later on. Any other aluminum housing, one shouldn't draw just one stud all the way tight until you've worked all the rest of them around in some sort of pattern. I encourage the use of 1/4 inch tools, 1/4 inch ratchets. 3/8 is pretty oversized for this. You can get in trouble. 1/2 inch is right out. You never ever use a half inch drive on something as delicate as this unit. Now we're up to our blocks here that fit, and take the hydraulic pressure to move the gear. These are arrow nuts. Let me show you what an arrow lock is. It's got a split. They're lock nuts, but they've got a split in the side. And the way that we return these to use is the same way we do the nylock, and that is just give them a little crack. And in so doing, you can use Loctite on these if you so wish. But distorting the metal tab on them will allow them to lock up very nicely. Something you do not want to have come loose inside the car while it's operating. Wipe the silicone off the outside of it. Our pump still works. We're all set. All we got to do is put the studs in here, the shorter studs, and there is a short thread and a long thread on each one, so each one of these requires just a cursory inspection. It's easy to tell which one's which end is the shorter end. Go around and put these all in place, and then we'll snug them all up with our 1/4-inch stud driver. I'm pleased to tell you we have no parts left over. That's always a good sign. We are very, very close to being done and having this reinstalled on the gearbox. There's not an easy way to check this out of the car. It is, after all, just a simple hydraulic unit. And if you pay attention to cleanliness and assembly, and you've got a diagram in front of you that you can refer to when you get into a jam and are not quite sure what to do next, then chances are it'll work just great for you. Now our overdrive is all set to put back on, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to chamfer the edge of this on the grinding wheel just a little tiny bit, so that when we go to install the overdrive onto the main shaft, the oil pump can be deflected. We've ground just a little tiny bit of a radius here, just a little tiny bit of one, and that will help us fit this. So we're going to come back over to our main gearbox and use the advantage of the grease to hold the ball. To fit the ball into its hole and fit our cam down over the top. And we'll notice that there's a male spline right in line here. So we're going to have to fit our overdrive on with the male spline, with a female spline, ready to accept the male spline on the overdrive. Now down inside the overdrive, which is going to be impossible for our videographer here to see, but down inside there are two sets of splines. One is the planet gear carrier, and one is the sprag clutch. We have to make sure that those are in line down inside here. They have to be in line so that the overdrive will slip on, and the planet gear carrier moves with the planet gear carrier moves with the rear flange, but the sprag clutch moves independently. So we have to align these two sets. So without being able to see this, all you can imagine is two sets of splines, one on top of the other. This one's fixed, this one turns anti-clockwise. And our goal is to get the splines in place. Now, here we go. We have a female spline at the top. If I'd thought of it before I got this stuff all over my hands, I would have cleaned off the rear surface of the overdrive just a little bit of the intermediate housing. Now with a paper gasket, you always fit it to the studs, because if you fit it to the holes, then the studs will come down and tear the gasket. So no more important is it than when you're working your oil pump on the bottom of your MGB engine. Okay, we have a female spline at the top. We have a male spline on the gearbox at the top. And it's fitted. All that remains is for us to go ahead and put the nuts on underneath and tighten them up underneath. Fitting your overdrive to your gearbox won't be anywhere nearly as easy as I just made it look, but I've done it a lot of times. But it will work. If it doesn't, don't beat it, don't shake it, just pull it back off again and rotate those splines so they're in line. What did we do? We took off the overdrive, we took off the remote control to start with, then we removed the overdrive unit. We took the overdrive unit completely apart. We washed everything, we wire wheeled things, we surfaced all the mating flanges. We laid everything out in a nice neat line, took a look at how everything was. We replaced all the O-rings. We fiddled and fiddled and fiddled, handling the parts 3 or 4 times so that we might see if there was a problem at any point. And then finally we assembled the rear, starting at the bottom with that handy thing with the flanges here, with the nuts, and we've got the whole thing together. And now he's on the gearbox. And I only have to tighten up a couple of nuts here, and that'll hold it until I can come back to it. When it sits on all the way, a couple of the studs are too long and you cannot get a nut on them. But put a nut onto a couple of the studs that you can actually reach, like here, just a couple of threads, that's all. Maybe one over on the other side someplace. Oh, where? We'll just select this guy right here. And then we're going to have to lever the overdrive up, but we don't want to pop him off the splines. So that's why we're putting these nuts on, and then we're going to lever him up just a little bit with one of our big screwdrivers. After we got those couple of started, and we can lift up, and we can go ahead and get the washer and the nut on in place. But if we had removed, if we simply lifted on the overdrive to get those nuts in place, we might have popped it up too far, and then we would be up that proverbial creek, because the overdrive would have popped off the splines, and then the next time we went to put it on, it would take us 3 hours or something crazy. So here's my first one up here, and now I can go ahead and there's only 2 of them here that give this particular problem, and we just have to find a place to lift the unit so I can get the nut on the bottom side here. Let me get this guy into place, lift him up. Oh, look at that. I don't even have to lift him, but I did have to lift him for this one here. So I'm just going to tighten these down. We won't know whether it works till it's in the car. But it'll work. They always do. Anyway, this is our quick video. We will have a supplement with this, a little bit of write-up, you know, showing you some of the tools and some of the parts that you'll need. And again, if you ever have any problems with your MG, be sure to contact us here at University Motors in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've been doing this for a long time. We'll be doing it for a long time, and we can show you how to do it too. Thanks.